Hey, my name is Ethan. I'm 29. 3 months ago, I was just a broke sound engineer trying to make rent in an apartment owned by the couple upstairs. Then, one stormy night, the landlord's wife knocked on my door soaking wet, and when I asked if she wanted to come inside, she looked at me with tired eyes and said, "Do you want me or the heat?" I found out later she had a spare key to her own place the whole time. She chose my door anyway. If you're watching this right now, tell me where you're from in the comments, because I still don't know if what we did was wrong. I'm sitting here in the dark, headphones on, listening to a sound file I recorded 4 months ago. Rain, thunder, the hiss of my radiator kicking in, and underneath it all, her laugh. Quiet, almost a whisper, the kind of sound you'd miss if you weren't paying attention. But I was always paying attention with her. People ask me sometimes what I do for work. Sound engineer, I tell them. Freelance. I record podcasts, edit corporate training videos, capture ambient noise for film projects. I'm the guy who makes sure you can hear the rain in the background of your favorite sad movie. I'm good at noticing sounds other people ignore. That's probably why I noticed her footsteps before I ever knew her name. 4 months ago, I moved into this building with 2 suitcases, a guitar case, and about $300 in my bank account. Rent-controlled, 4th floor walk-up. The kind of place where the stairs creak under your weight and the hallway lights flicker if you sneeze too hard. I was hauling my second load of boxes up the narrow staircase when I met Mrs. Bellamy. She stood in her doorway across from mine, wearing a bathrobe and slippers, watching me struggle with a box marked cables. "You the new tenant?" she asked. "Yeah, Ethan Cole." She nodded slowly, studying me like I was a puzzle she'd already decided didn't fit right. "That radiator's gonna drive you crazy. Hisses and clanks all night long." "I'll get used to it." "You say that now." She crossed her arms. "Harris couple owns your unit. They own half the building, actually. Live in the penthouse. Keep to themselves, mostly." "Good to know." "He's the landlord. Big money type. She's some kind of doctor, therapist or something. They got people coming and going all hours." I just nodded, trying to edge past her with my box. "Thin walls," she added. "You'll hear everything, and they'll hear you." That first night, I fell asleep on a mattress on the floor, boxes still stacked around me like cardboard walls. The radiator hissed. The fire escape rattled in the wind outside my window. And above me, footsteps, muffled voices, the clink of glassware. Someone was hosting something upstairs. A dinner party, maybe. I didn't know their names yet. Didn't know that one set of footsteps would eventually become the only sound I'd wait for. The next morning, I met her for the first time. Sort of. I was grabbing a package from the lobby when the elevator dinged. A man stepped out first. Tall, expensive suit, phone pressed to his ear. He barely glanced at me as he brushed past. Then she followed. Black woman. Early 40s, I'd guess. Tailored coat, hair pulled back perfectly, carrying herself like someone who'd learned a long time ago that posture mattered. I held the lobby door open without thinking about it. She looked at me. Really looked at me. For maybe 2 seconds. Her eyes swept over my guitar case, my worn jeans, my tired face. "Thank you," she said quietly. Her voice was softer than I expected. Professional. Careful. Then she was gone, following the man in the suit toward a black car idling at the curb. I watched them drive away and went back upstairs to unpack. That evening, I heard them arguing, not screaming, not throwing things, just raised voices through the ceiling, hers sharp and controlled, his dismissive and impatient. Then silence, like someone hit a mute button, The kind of quiet that feels heavier than noise. 2 days later, I ran into her in the elevator. I was rushing to a client meeting downtown, backpack slung over one shoulder, headphones around my neck. The elevator doors were closing when a silk scarf caught between them. A hand shot through the gap. The doors jerked open. She stepped in, slightly breathless, tucking the scarf around her neck. "Sorry," she said. "Thank you for... I don't know what you did, but thanks." "Just hit the door button." We stood there as the elevator groaned downward. I could smell her perfume, citrus and vanilla, subtle but present. She was dressed for work or something formal. Black slacks, cream blouse, that same careful posture. "You're the new neighbor," she said after a moment. "Across from Mrs. Bellamy?" "Yeah, Ethan." "Nadine." She extended her hand. Professional, firm grip. "My husband handles the building management, but I try to remember faces." I shook her hand, noticing how soft it was compared to mine. "You're the therapist? Couples counselor?" Her smile tightened slightly. "That's me." "I think I saw you on a podcast thumbnail once." "Probably." She glanced at the floor numbers ticking down. "If you have any issues with the apartment, let Marcus know. He's usually very responsive." The elevator lurched slightly. Her scarf slipped off her shoulder. I caught it before it hit the floor. The silk was impossibly soft between my fingers. Cool, smooth. I handed it back. "Thank you," she said again. The doors opened. Marcus was waiting in the lobby, checking his watch with visible impatience. Nadine straightened immediately. Her entire posture changed, stiffened. She stepped out, and I watched her transform from the woman who'd been slightly breathless in the elevator to the polished wife standing beside her husband. I went to my meeting. That night, I lay in bed and replayed the moment I'd held her scarf. The following Koizum. Week passed in a rhythm I didn't realize I was learning. Mornings, cheap coffee, emails from potential clients, editing audio at my makeshift desk. Afternoons, meetings, recording sessions, trying not to think about my bank account. Evenings, ramen dinners, guitar practice, the sound of footsteps overhead. I started recognizing her footsteps. Lighter than his. Slower. She wore heels most days. A distinct click, click, click across the ceiling that told me when she was home. I told myself I wasn't listening for them. But I was. One Wednesday night, I was testing the acoustics in my apartment, playing my guitar softly and recording the ambient noise. Rain tapped against the fire escape. The radiator hissed. I was building a sound library, collecting textures I could use in future projects. Around 11, there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find Nadine standing there in loungewear. Soft pants, an oversized cardigan, hair down for the first time since I'd seen her. "Hey," she said. "I'm sorry to bother you. I just wanted to check on the noise levels. Sound carries through the pipes in weird ways here, and I don't want you getting complaints from other tenants." "Oh, yeah, no problem. Come in. I'll show you the setup." She hesitated for just a second before stepping inside. My apartment looked like what it was. A broke 29-year-old's cluttered space. Cables everywhere. Boxes I still hadn't unpacked. My mattress visible through the bedroom door. But she didn't look uncomfortable. If anything, she seemed curious. I showed her my equipment, explaining how I kept the volumes low, how I monitored levels. She picked up my chipped mug from the desk. "You drink out of this?" "Every day." "It's got character," she said, smiling slightly. We talked for maybe 10 minutes. She asked about my work. I asked about hers, carefully avoiding anything too personal. At one point, she stood by the window, looking out at the fire escape and the rain. "I can hear your guitar sometimes," she said quietly. Through the floor. It's not unpleasant. I can stop if it bothers you. No. She turned back to me. It's nice, knowing someone else is awake. She left a few minutes later, pausing in my doorway. The radiator really is loud, she said, half smiling. Mrs. Bellamy wasn't kidding. Yeah, it hisses like an angry snake. But it's warm in here. She pulled her cardigan tighter around herself. That's something. Then she walked back upstairs. I stood in my doorway, watching the empty hallway, replaying the way she'd said it's nice knowing someone else is awake. The storm came 5 days later. The weather forecast had been warning about it all week. Major system moving in. Heavy rain, possible power outages, the whole thing. I spent the day preparing, charging batteries, setting up candles, positioning my recording equipment by the window to capture the thunder. By 8 p.m., the rain started. By 9, it was pounding. By 10, the lights flickered. I was in the middle of recording the fire escape when the power stuttered and dimmed. The radiator hissed louder in the half-darkness. Then someone knocked, fast, urgent. I opened the door. Nadine stood there, soaked, hair plastered to her face, clutching her phone and a small bag. I'm sorry, she said quickly. The penthouse lock jammed and Marcus isn't home yet. I didn't want to get stuck in the hallway in the dark. I stepped aside without thinking. Yeah, come in. You can wait here. She hesitated, water dripping onto my doormat. I tried to lighten the moment. You, want to warm up? It came out wrong, awkward. She looked at me with tired eyes and the smallest smile. Do you want me? She said slowly. Or the heat? The question hung there. Neither of us answered it. She stepped inside. I closed the door. The storm roared louder against the windows. I gave her a towel. Offered her my oversized hoodie because her shirt was soaked through. She took it after a moment, slipping into my bathroom to change. When she came back out, she looked different. Smaller. Younger. The hoodie swallowed her frame, and her hair was still damp, falling around her shoulders. Tea? I offered. Please. I made tea in my chipped mug and poured water into a glass for myself. We sat on opposite ends of my small couch. The radiator hissed between us. I put on a vinyl record, something low and instrumental, so the silence wouldn't feel so heavy. You collect records? She asked. Yeah, old habit. I like the way they sound. The crackle, the warmth. Digital audio is too clean sometimes. She nodded, sipping the tea. Marcus hates clutter. Everything in our place is minimal, curated. It's beautiful, but... She didn't finish. But what? Nothing. It's fine. She wrapped her hands around the mug. This is nice, though. The chip on the rim, it feels lived in. We talked for over an hour. She told me about her podcast, about the couples she worked with, about how strange it was to spend all day helping people communicate when... She stopped herself again. I told her about growing up working class, about how I ended up in sound engineering by accident, about my friend Jordan who thought I was crazy for taking this apartment. Why crazy? She asked. He said I'd feel out of place. Rich landlords, nice cars in the garage, and me with my second-hand equipment and ramen budget. Do you feel out of place? I looked at her sitting on my couch in my hoodie, holding my chipped mug. Sometimes, I said. Not right now. Something shifted in her expression. Not quite a smile, more like recognition. The storm began to ease outside. The rain went from pounding to pattering. Nadine glanced at her bag on the floor. That's when I saw it. A ring of keys had spilled out slightly, including one very clearly labeled Penthouse Spare. I stared at it. She followed my gaze. Her face went still. "You had a key," I said quietly. "The whole time." She didn't answer immediately. When she did, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Yes." "So the lock didn't jam?" "No." "You could have gone upstairs any time?" "Yes." "But you came here?" She looked directly at me. "I didn't want to be alone up there, in that big empty space, during the storm. I heard your music earlier, and I knew you were home, and I just—" "You chose me." She nodded slowly. We sat there in the quiet. The record had stopped spinning. The radiator hissed. "Marcus is my landlord," I said finally, "and he might hire me for audio work, which means you're—" "His wife, yes. This is complicated." "I know. We haven't done anything wrong." "I know that too." But we both understood that wrong was a moving target. She stood, gathering her things. I handed her the bag. She kept the hoodie on, pulling it around herself like armor. At the door, she paused. "Your radiator's too loud," she said. "I know. But it feels less empty in here." She stepped into the hallway. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. "Thank you, Ethan." Then she was gone. I stood in my doorway for a long time, listening to her footsteps fade up the stairwell. The next morning I woke up replaying every moment. Her laugh, her hands around my mug, the way she'd admitted she chose my door. I washed the mug she'd used, hung up the damp towel, tried to pretend everything was normal. Around noon, I ran into Mrs. Bellamy in the hallway. "Heard company last night," she said, raising an eyebrow. "Just a neighbor during the storm." Walls remember better than people do in this building." She studied me. "Be careful, young man." That afternoon, I met Jordan at a cafe. I told him a carefully edited version, left out the spare key, left out most of the tension. He still saw through it. "So the landlord's wife came to your apartment during a storm. And what? You made her tea?" "Yeah." "And that's it?" "That's it." "Ethan." He leaned back, shaking his head. "That power dynamic is a mess. Rich husband who owns your apartment. Older woman, married woman. You're setting yourself up for disaster." Nothing happened. Yet. I didn't argue. That evening, Marcus emailed me. Subject: audio project discussion. He wanted to meet about possibly hiring me for a financial podcast and some promotional videos. Good money, regular work. The next day, I saw them in the lobby. Nadine was on her phone, discussing some charity event. Marcus was beside her talking about property values. When Nadine saw me, her expression went carefully neutral. Polite, professional. No trace of the woman who'd sat on my couch in my hoodie. Marcus clapped me on the shoulder. "Ethan, we should talk soon about that project." "Sounds good." Nadine's eyes met mine for 1 second. Then she looked away. 2 nights later, another storm rolled in. Smaller this time. Steady rain, but no thunder. I told myself she wouldn't come. I told myself I didn't want her to, but I left the chipped mug out on the counter anyway. Hours passed. I put on my headphones and tried to work. Then, a soft knock. Not urgent like last time, almost hesitant. I opened the door. Nadine stood there with a container of food. "Leftovers from a work thing," she said. "Thought you might want them, as an apology for bothering you last time." "You didn't bother me." "Still." I let her in. We ate the food, some kind of catered pasta that was way too fancy for my kitchen. We talked about music, about books, about her podcast episodes on emotional intimacy. She never explicitly criticized Marcus, but the cracks showed. "Everyone assumes therapists have perfect marriages," she said at one point, then went quiet. Before she left, we set an unspoken rule. "Just during storms," she said. Just neighborly, I added. We both knew it was a lie, but we told it anyway. She left that night, returning my hoodie folded neatly on the chair. I'll try not to make a habit of this, she said. But as the door closed behind her, I didn't put the chipped mug back in the cupboard. I left it out. Just in case. Over the next 3 weeks, it rained 6 times. She came down 4 of those nights. A pattern formed without us naming it. She'd knock, I'd let her in. She'd warm her hands on the mug. We'd sit and talk. Sometimes for 20 minutes, sometimes for 2 hours. We talked about everything except the obvious. I learned that she hated silence. That she'd wanted to be a musician before she became a therapist. That she felt like she was performing her own life most days. She learned that I recorded sounds to feel less alone. That my family back home didn't really understand what I did. That I was terrified of being broke forever. One Tuesday, she only stayed 15 minutes. Just long enough to listen to a rough mix I was working on. One Thursday, she brought cookies from a work event, and we ate them while rain drummed the fire escape. One Sunday afternoon, during a gentle drizzle, she just stood by my window watching the rain, not saying anything. I started checking the weather forecast obsessively. Jordan called me out over beers. "You're in an emotional affair," he said bluntly. "We haven't done anything." "That's not the point. You're emotionally intimate with a married woman. Her husband is your landlord. This is a bomb, Ethan." "I know." "Then stop." But I didn't. A week later, Marcus invited me up to the penthouse. The contrast hit me immediately. Marble floors, abstract art, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Everything cold and perfect and expensive. Nadine was there, dressed for work, introducing me to Marcus like I was just another tenant. "Ethan's very talented," she said professionally. "I've heard his work through the floor." Marcus pitched me on a financial advice podcast. Good pay. Regular episodes. I said yes, trying to ignore how trapped I felt. During the meeting, I noticed a monitor on the wall briefly showing building security feeds before Marcus switched inputs. The hallway outside my apartment flickered across the screen for 2 seconds. My stomach dropped. Cameras. Of course there were cameras. After the meeting, Nadine walked me to the elevator. Just before the doors closed, she leaned in slightly. "The walls are thinner up here than they look," she whispered. Then she stepped back into her public posture. 3 days later, the power went out completely. No flicker, just sudden, total darkness. The storm outside was vicious. Thunder shook the windows. Rain hammered the building. Frantic knocking at my door. I opened it to find Nadine, flashlight in hand, breathing too fast. I can't do the dark during storms. I'm sorry, I know I shouldn't." "Come in." She was shaking. I lit candles, put on a battery-powered record player, made her sit down. "Talk to me," I said. "Tell me what you need." When I was a kid, I got stuck alone in a powerless house during a hurricane. I've hated it ever since." Another thunderclap. She gasped, gripping my mug so hard I thought it might shatter. Without thinking, I knelt in front of her and took her hands. "Breathe with me," I said softly. "In and out. Match my breathing." She tried. Failed. Tried again. I pressed my forehead gently to hers. "Focus on me. Not the storm. Just me." We stayed like that, foreheads touching, breathing together, while the storm raged outside. When the lights finally flickered back on, we both flinched at the brightness. We stepped apart slowly. She looked terrified. Not of the storm, of what she'd just let me see. "I don't let anyone see me like that," she whispered. "Not even Marcus." "I won't tell anyone. Please don't use this in your recordings." She was half joking, half serious. "I promise." She left a few minutes later, still shaken. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept feeling the warmth of her forehead against mine. Over the next few days, everything felt different. Mrs. Bellamy mentioned hearing 2 sets of footsteps pacing during the blackout. Jordan told me I was already in too deep. I tried having coffee with Nadine in the building's shared lounge to prove we could be normal. We couldn't. The conversation felt forced. Public. Wrong. We gave up after 15 minutes. Then Marcus called me back to the penthouse to finalize the contract. He was friendly. Too friendly. He poured expensive whiskey, talked about protecting his investor client's privacy. Then he casually mentioned the building's security system. "Cameras in all common areas," he said, pulling up a laptop. "Check this out. Crystal clear footage." He clicked through saved clips. My blood went cold. One frame showed the hallway outside my door on a stormy night. The image was blurry but recognizable. Nadine's silhouette slipping into my apartment. Marcus didn't say anything directly, just paused on that frame for 3 seconds. "Some tenants come and go at odd hours," he said with a slight smile. I kept my voice steady. "Neighbors sometimes need help during storms." "Right." He closed the laptop. "Just good to know we're all watching out for each other." I left the penthouse with the signed contract in my bag and fear in my chest. That night, I texted Nadine on her work number. He showed me the cameras. "Be careful." Her response came an hour later. "This has gone too far. I'm sorry. No follow-up. No explanation. Just that." I sat on my couch, staring at the message until my phone screen went dark. Above me, I heard footsteps, but they never came down the stairs. The next 3 weeks were dry. Not just weather-wise, no storms, no knocks, no texts. I saw Nadine twice in the lobby, both times with Marcus. Both times she was polished, professional, unreachable. I tried to move on, downloaded a dating app, went on one date with a woman my age who laughed at all the right moments and smelled like vanilla body spray. But it wasn't citrus and vanilla. It wasn't her. I hated myself for comparing. I kept working on Marcus's podcast, editing his voice, wondering what he knew. Jordan took me to a bar one night. "You need to decide," he said. "Either you commit to backing off completely, or you admit what this actually is. What is it? An emotional affair. And those hurt people just as much as physical ones." I didn't answer. 4 weeks after Nadine's last text, I saw her in the lobby with a younger woman, Latina, mid-20s, carrying folders. "This is Layla," Nadine said politely. "My goddaughter and assistant." Layla shook my hand, her eyes sharp and assessing. When Nadine and I exchanged hellos, something small passed between us. A micro-expression neither of us could fully hide. Layla noticed. I could tell. That night, alone in my apartment, I listened to the old recording again. Rain. Radiator. Her quiet laugh. The silence afterward felt louder than any storm. A month passed. Then another storm came. The forecast appeared on my phone Thursday morning while I was drinking coffee at my desk. Major system moving in. Heavy rain expected by evening. I stared at the notification longer than I should have. Then I deleted it. Pretended I hadn't seen it. I spent the day trying to stay busy. Morning call with Marcus about new podcast episodes. He was pleased with my work, talking about expanding the series. I said all the right things while my stomach twisted. Around noon, I saw Nadine in the lobby. She was on her phone, Layla beside her carrying folders. Professional mode, polished, untouchable. She glanced at me. Just a polite nod. Nothing more. Layla watched the interaction carefully. Too carefully. I went back upstairs and worked through the afternoon, forcing myself not to check the time, not to listen for footsteps overhead, not to think about rain. By 7 p.m., the storm started. Light at first, then building. By 9, it was pounding the fire escape like it had that first night. I told myself I wasn't waiting. I told myself I'd moved on. But I was home. And I was listening. Around 10, I gave up pretending to work. I grabbed my jacket and went out to the corner store, hood up, rain soaking through my jeans. I bought snacks I didn't need, walked slowly back, took the long way. Anything to not be sitting in my apartment waiting for a knock that wouldn't come. When I reached my floor, I stopped. Hanging from my doorknob was my old hoodie, washed, folded, neat, and draped across the top, her silk scarf. The hallway was empty. The fluorescent lights buzzed and flickered overhead. The radiator hissed somewhere down the hall. I stood there, groceries in hand, rain dripping off my jacket onto the worn carpet. The hoodie was still slightly warm, like she'd just hung it there. I reached out slowly, fingers brushing the silk scarf. It was damp from her hair, maybe, or from the rain she'd walked through to get here. This wasn't an accident. This was a message. I brought them inside, set the groceries on the counter, spread the hoodie out on my table, laid the scarf beside it. The fabric smelled like her perfume and laundry detergent. Citrus and vanilla and something clean and careful. Proof she'd held these. Washed them. Carried them down those stairs. The storm hammered my windows. I paced my small apartment, running my hands through my wet hair. She'd returned them during Marcus's business trip. I'd overheard him mention it in our last call. 2 nights away. Starting tonight. She was alone up there, and she'd left me a signal. I picked up my phone. Put it down. Picked it up again. I didn't have her personal number, just the work email through Marcus's project. I typed a text to that number, deleted it. Typed another, deleted that too. Jordan called. I let it go to voicemail. Around midnight, I made a decision. I put the hoodie on, stuffed the scarf into my pocket, and started climbing the stairs. On the second landing, I ran into Mrs. Bellamy struggling with a trash bag. "Storm's got the elevator acting up," she said, slightly out of breath. "Where you headed?" My mind went blank. Checking a leak. Marcus mentioned something about the top floor." She studied me. "At midnight?" "Yeah, he's out of town. Asked me to take a look." She didn't fully believe me, but she nodded. "Be careful." I kept climbing. At the penthouse door, I stopped. Inside, voices, muffled but distinct. Nadine and Marcus. My stomach dropped. He wasn't supposed to be back yet. The voices rose, not screaming, but tense. Sharp. Marcus's voice. Constantly distracted. Checked the footage again. Nadine's voice. Monitoring me like I'm one of your investments. More words. I couldn't make out. Then a crash. Something glass hitting a counter, maybe. Silence. Then footsteps approaching the door from inside. I stepped back, heart hammering. The footsteps stopped. I stood there in the dim hallway, scarf in my pocket, hand raised to knock, frozen. I had no right to be here. No right to insert myself into their marriage more than I already had. Whatever was happening between them, it existed before I moved into this building, and it would exist after. I knelt slowly, pulled the scarf from my pocket, smoothed it flat and slid it under the gap at the bottom of the door. The voices inside went suddenly quiet. Long pause. Footsteps approached the door again. I didn't wait to see if it would open. I turned and hurried back down the stairs, taking them 2 at a time, pulse racing. Back in my apartment, I leaned against the closed door, soaked and shaking. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Unknown number. Radiators hissing again. I can hear your music. I stared at the message. typed back, "Storm's loud tonight." Her response came immediately. I know. I set my phone on the table, looked around my cluttered apartment. The chipped mug sat on the counter where I'd left it. The vinyl record from our first storm night sat on the player. I didn't invite her. Didn't text back. Instead, I did something else. I walked to my door and opened it slightly. Not all the way, just cracked. Barely an inch. Enough that if someone turned the knob gently, it would open. Then I sat on my couch and waited. The hallway was quiet except for the storm outside and the buzz of fluorescent lights. Minutes passed. 10, 20. I listened to every creak in the building, every footstep, every door closing somewhere above or below, then soft footsteps in the hallway. They stopped outside my door. I held my breath. The doorknob turned. Slowly, carefully. The door opened another few inches. She stood there in the dim light from the hallway. Hair down, no makeup. Wearing soft clothes I'd never seen before. She looked younger, tired, real. She stepped inside, closed the door quietly behind her. "Hey," I said. "Hey." We stayed on opposite sides of the room at first, neither of us moving closer. "I didn't know if you'd come," I said finally. "I didn't know either." She wrapped her arms around herself, until I was already halfway down the stairs. "What happened up there?" "Marcus came back early. We argued. About a lot of things. The cameras, my schedule, how I've been different lately." She looked at me. "He doesn't know about you specifically, but he knows something's changed." "I'm sorry." "Don't be." She moved to my window, looking out at the rain on the fire escape. "I've been different for a long time. He's just noticing now because it's inconvenient for him." I stayed quiet. She turned back to me. "I tried to stop coming here. For weeks. I told myself it was the right thing. The smart thing." "It probably is." "Then why does your radiator feel more like home than my own bedroom?" The question hung there. No good answer. She sat on the far end of my couch. I sat on the other end. The distance between us felt intentional, necessary. "Tell me what happened after I texted you," she said, "during the dry weeks." So I did. I told her about the failed date, about listening to old recordings of her laugh, about almost looking for a new apartment just to escape the weight of living under her. She told me about recommitting to her marriage publicly, about therapy sessions where she counseled other couples on honesty while hiding this, about Layla starting to ask careful questions. "She suspects," Nadine said quietly. "She hasn't said anything directly, but I can tell. Mrs. Bellamy, too." We sat there, the record playing low between us. At one point, she reached for the chipped mug. Our fingers brushed. We both pulled back slightly. Not from fear, from knowing that even small touches carried weight now. "I missed this," she said, holding the mug. "The hiss of your radiator, the way your apartment feels. Lived in. I missed knowing someone else was awake. I missed you." She looked at me. "I shouldn't say that," I added. "But it's true." "Yeah." The record ended. Neither of us got up to flip it. After a long silence, she stood. I walked her to the door. This time, instead of just letting her leave, I picked up the hoodie from where I'd hung it. "Here," I said, holding it out. "Keep it, properly." She took it slowly, held it against her chest. "Thank you," she whispered. She opened the door just wide enough to slip through. Before she left, she looked back at me. "I can't promise this won't hurt," she said. "I know. But I also can't promise I'll stay away. I know that too." She left. The door closed softly. I stood there in the quiet, listening to her footsteps fade up the stairwell. The next few weeks were different. Not like before. Not storms every few days with long visits, more careful, more measured. One Tuesday, light rain. She texted asking if I could lower the volume on a mix I was working on. I did. She sent back a simple, "Thank you." One Thursday, she stopped by to drop off pastries from a conference. Stayed 7 minutes. We talked about safe things. The weather, a funny client story, building maintenance. One Saturday afternoon, we ran into each other in the laundry room. She was folding clothes. I was waiting for a dryer. "Fighting over appliances," she said with a small smile. "Very normal neighbor behavior." Extremely normal. We both knew it was a lie, but we told it anyway. Then Mrs. Bellamy collapsed. I found her in the hallway one Tuesday morning, dizzy and disoriented, trying to get back to her apartment. I called 911 immediately. Nadine was coming down the stairs, dressed for work. She saw what was happening and shifted instantly into professional mode. Calm, competent, reassuring. We rode to the hospital together in the ambulance, sat in the waiting room while doctors ran tests. "She'll be okay," Nadine said after a nurse updated us. "Dehydration and low blood sugar, but she'll be fine." "That's good." We sat in those uncomfortable plastic chairs, not talking about us, just about Mrs. Bellamy, about the building, about normal things. For 2 hours we were just neighbors helping another neighbor, nothing more complicated than that. It felt like relief. Mrs. Bellamy came home 3 days later. She was softer after that. Grateful. She stopped making pointed comments about footsteps and late-night visitors. Started leaving me casseroles instead. One evening, there was a knock at my door. Nadine stood there holding my hoodie, freshly washed again, folded perfectly. She didn't step inside. Just handed it over. "Thank you," she said, "for helping her, for being careful." "Of course." She nodded once and turned back toward the stairs. I watched her go. We were learning a new rhythm, slower, more distant, still connected, but holding the line. 3 months later, Nadine's new book launched. I saw the promotional materials everywhere, her face on posters, her name trending online. Rebuilding Trust, a guide to long-term commitment. The irony wasn't lost on me. Layla emailed from Nadine's work account, asking if I could handle the audio for a live book launch event at a downtown bookstore. Professional request. Marcus's company would pay. I said yes. The event was on a Thursday evening. I arrived early to set up equipment, positioned myself in the back with headphones, monitoring levels. The room filled with people. Couples mostly, some alone. All there to hear Dr. Nadine Harris talk about saving relationships. She took the stage in a sharp blazer and calm confidence. For 40 minutes, she spoke about communication. Trust. The small betrayals that erode foundations. The importance of choosing your partner every day. I watched from the back, adjusting audio levels, trying not to feel the weight of every word. She was brilliant. She always had been. At one point, her eyes swept the room and landed briefly on me. 1 second, maybe 2. Then she looked away and continued speaking. After the event, people swarmed her for book signings. I packed up my gear outside in the light rain. Nadine emerged 20 minutes later, saying goodbye to the last attendees. Layla stood nearby with an umbrella. Nadine walked over to me as I loaded cables into my bag. "Thank you for doing this," she said. "The sound quality was perfect." "Just doing my job." Still. We stood there in the drizzle, professional, polite, like we were nothing more than sound engineer and client. Layla watched from a few feet away. I could feel her analyzing every micro-expression. "Get home safe," Nadine said, lifting her umbrella. "Old buildings and storms don't mix." The words carried layers. Then Marcus pulled up in a black car. Nadine got in, Layla followed. I watched them drive away. That night, back in my apartment, I listened to the recording from her book launch, her voice through my headphones talking about commitment and honesty and choosing to stay. I thought about the first storm, about her soaked and shivering at my door, about the forehead touch during the blackout, about dancing in my living room while Mrs. Bellamy knocked, about the hoodie on my doorknob. I thought about all the small crossings that felt inevitable when you were in them. Some stories don't have endings, just quieter chapters. Marcus's podcast continued. I kept editing episodes, hearing his voice in my headphones, wondering what he knew and what he pretended not to know. Nadine's book did well. I saw her on morning shows, heard her voice on podcasts, watched her become even more successful at teaching people how to save what we'd spent months risking. I still live in the same fourth-floor walk-up. Still freelance, still barely making rent some months, still hear footsteps overhead. Sometimes Nadine and I pass in the lobby. We smile, say hello, ask about each other's work. Sometimes we don't see each other for weeks. Sometimes, on stormy nights, my phone buzzes with a text from that unknown number. Radiator's loud tonight, and I'll reply, yeah, but it's warm. We don't always meet, but we don't always stay apart either. There have been other storms since that first one. Some brought knocks, some didn't. We never labeled what this is. Never made promises we couldn't keep. Never pretended we could be more than stolen moments between the thunder. Tonight, as I sit here listening to that original recording, rain, radiator, her quiet laugh, another storm is starting outside. The forecast came through an hour ago. Heavy rain, possible outages. I've learned not to expect anything, but I still set the chipped mug on the counter. Still put the record on low. Still leave my door unlocked. Just in case. The rain picks up, drumming the fire escape. The radiator kicks in with its familiar hiss and clank. I walk to my door. Don't open it. Just press my hand against the wood. Look through the peephole at the distorted hallway. Empty. Or maybe not. Sometimes shadows look like possibilities. I smile to myself. Step back, return to my desk, put my headphones on, press play on that first recording again. Her laugh fills my ears. Quiet. Almost a whisper. The kind of sound you'd miss if you weren't paying attention. But I was always paying attention with her. And some nights, when the rain hits the fire escape just right, I still check the peephole, just to see if she's chosen the heat again. Be honest, which door would you have knocked on?